My brother stole my entire inheritance while I was in a coma, thinking I was helpless, but he didn't know I still had power of attorney. What happens next will leave you speechless. When I opened my eyes, the room was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines. The air smelled of antiseptic and something faintly metallic. My throat was dry, and my arms felt like they weighed 100 pounds each. But I could speak. I could think. I could remember. The nurse? I rasped, blinking up at the pale ceiling. Where's my brother? A young man in scrubs looked up from the clipboard near the foot of my bed. He hesitated before answering, like he wasn't sure if the question would hurt me more than help me. He was here a lot at first, the nurse said slowly. Came almost every week. Then he stopped. I think it's been about 3 months now. 3 months. That number hit me like a soft hammer to the chest. Not enough to crack anything. Just enough to bruise. I nodded like it didn't matter. But inside I knew. Something was wrong. Something had changed while I was asleep. I stayed in the hospital another week. Most of the staff treated me like a miracle. You're lucky, they said. Most people in a coma for that long don't come back like this. But luck didn't explain the pit in my stomach. It didn't explain the emptiness I felt when I asked for my belongings, and the nurse handed me a plastic bag with nothing but a wallet, a phone that didn't turn on, and the watch my father gave me missing. When they wheeled me out of that hospital, the sun was too bright, like it was mocking me. I didn't go to a rehab center. I didn't ask anyone to pick me up. I took a cab to the one place I thought would ground me. Home. But home wasn't there. The small white house on Evergreen Lane had new shutters. The porch was painted blue. The tire swing Dad tied to the oak tree out front was gone. A woman with a phone pressed to her ear opened the door and looked at me like I was the lost one. Can I help you? She asked, tilting her head. This house? I said, my voice cracking. It belongs to the Beckers. She blinked. No, sir. This was sold months ago. I rent it now from, She checked her phone, scrolling. A company called Heartstone Holdings. Heartstone. My brother's middle name. I didn't say another word. I just nodded, turned, and walked back to the cab. My legs shook the entire way. By the time I reached my small apartment on the edge of town, what was supposed to be temporary after Dad died, I already had answers forming in my mind. But I needed proof. I dug through the drawer beneath my old desk and found the red folder. The one with our father's original will. I remembered the way he looked at me the day he signed it. Sitting under the tree in our backyard, the same one we planted after Mom died. His voice was tired, but clear. You're the careful one, he said. Your brother's got fire, but you've got judgment. I want you to hold this. I had nodded, not knowing then how heavy that responsibility would become. Inside the folder was another document. Power of attorney, in my name, signed 2 years before the accident. I traced the signature with my finger. Real. Legal. Binding. My brother must have assumed it had been lost in the crash. But I kept a copy. Always. I didn't call him. I didn't shout or accuse. I didn't show up at his door. That would have been too easy. Instead, I started digging. First, I accessed the property records online. Our home, transferred 4 months ago to Heartstone Holdings. I requested the official deed, and when it arrived in the mail, there it was, my name forged. Sloppily. I remembered how he used to rush through school projects. Good enough, he'd always say. No one looks too close. But I looked. The cabins in Bear Creek gone. Sold one by one. All through Heartstone. All within 3 months of each other while I was lying in a hospital bed, tubes in my veins. I imagined him sitting at a desk, clicking submit, as I lay between life and death. It wasn't just property. My father's watch collection was gone too. I remembered the case clearly, 13 watches, each with its own story. Gone. Auctioned, the records said, through a private seller in another state. No name listed, but the payment was traced to a Heartstone bank account. He hadn't just sold things. He had erased them. I leaned back in my chair, the documents spread out across the table like broken glass. I tried to feel rage. I tried to shake with it, but instead all I felt was cold. Heavy. Quiet. It wasn't just theft. It was betrayal. The same kind I'd felt before. When we were kids, he used to test the limits. At 13, he blamed me for stealing $20 from Mom's purse. I took the fall. I sat grounded while he got ice cream and a new video game. He laughed at me from the porch that night, the light catching his teeth. That was the first time I saw the joy he took in power. Started small, but it grew, and now it had swallowed everything. The next morning, I opened a new file on my laptop. Restoration plan. I began with the documents, then the names of buyers, then my brother's financial accounts, his business records, his habits. Every small move he made. I listed it all. But I didn't send anything. I didn't threaten him. I watched, planned, waited. He thought I was still weak, still recovering, still the same little brother who looked up to him. But I wasn't. That coma gave me something else, something more than rest. It gave me silence. And in that silence, I remembered every lie, every debt, every moment he stood above me thinking I'd never rise. And now I didn't want revenge. I wanted correction. The first time I stepped into the bank, I walked slow, deliberate. My coat sleeves were tugged low, hiding the thin scars that ran along my arms. Reminders of surgeries, for drips, and near death. I didn't want pity. I wanted doubt. I wanted the staff to look at me and see someone harmless. Someone still healing. My father's cane clicked quietly against the tile floor, and every sound in that place felt too loud, too sharp. But I moved through it like a man reading a map only he could see. The banker, Eric, recognized my last name the moment I introduced myself. He straightened up behind his desk, adjusted his tie like he was suddenly in the presence of someone important. Or maybe someone familiar. "I remember your father," he said, voice low, respectful. "He used to bring you in when you were younger. You'd sit in that chair there and count the pens." I smiled faintly and nodded, though the memory hit like a bruise. I could almost see Dad beside me now, quiet, strong, with a leather wallet that folded in 3 places and always smelled of sawdust. He never raised his voice. He didn't have to. His word carried weight. "I need access to archived documents," I said. "Family trust records, property transfer histories, my father's estate account." Eric paused. He didn't ask why. He didn't press. Maybe he saw something in my eyes. Maybe he remembered the kind of man my father was, and assumed the son must carry that same precision. "Take your time," he said, printing the first stack of files. "Let me know if you need anything else." I nodded and carried the papers to the private reading room at the back. It was small and cold, the light buzzing faintly overhead. I laid the pages out across the table one by one. First, it looked clean, too clean, but I knew my brother's habits. He never cared for details. He was all surface, all performance. It didn't take long before I saw the first crack.
À signature.
Slightly slanted. The K in my name didn't curve right. The pressure points were off, too heavy at the start, too weak at the end. I circled it in red. The next morning I found another, then another. By the end of the week, I had circled 12. He'd forged me like he always did everything else, lazy and rushed. He assumed no one would look. He assumed I wouldn't come back. I reviewed transactions line by line, timestamp by timestamp. My brother had started moving money months before the accident. He'd requested control over certain assets on my behalf, claiming I had approved it verbally. He even added a fake consultant to the account ledger, withdrawing $40,000 for strategic advisement. I looked up the name. No such person existed. What hurt more than the theft was the timeline. The trust fund, the one set up after Mom died, was accessed 2 weeks before my accident. 2 weeks. And then I was in a coma. The coincidence wasn't lost on me, but I stored that suspicion in a quiet drawer in my mind. I wasn't ready for what that might mean. I kept my movements quiet. I never asked for too much at once, just enough each day. Eric never questioned me, though he began to look more curious as my visits stacked up. One afternoon, as I folded another set of photocopied deeds into my bag, Eric leaned in and said, "It's funny, You and your brother. People said you were close. I met his eyes and replied calmly. He's always been close, just not in the ways that count. He didn't ask anything after that. At home, I lined up the papers on my wall. Red circles, notes, patterns. My room looked like the inside of a detective's mind. But I wasn't trying to solve a mystery, I was building a timeline, building a case. And then I remembered the hospital. The first time I woke up, groggy and half-drugged, he was there. He gripped my hand and smiled like he'd just come back from war. You scared the hell out of me, he whispered, voice cracking just enough to seem real. I wanted to believe him, but even then, even in that hazy fog of medicine and machines, I watched him. His eyes weren't on me. They were on the nurse's cart, on the bag beside my bed, on the door. Later, I found out he'd asked the nurses if my briefcase had survived the crash. It hadn't. That briefcase held my father's signed will and the original power of attorney papers. He must have thought he was free. That was his mistake. Because 2 years before, I had made a quiet choice. Back when Dad handed me the papers, I didn't just store them in my briefcase. I made a copy. I placed it in a safety deposit box under my godfather's name. He was the only man besides my father I trusted. A month after his death, I inherited that box. I kept the key. I never told anyone. I opened the box on a rainy Thursday, hands trembling slightly. Inside was the copy. Crisp, stamped, dated, signed. It smelled faintly of ink and time. I slipped it into a new folder and labeled it Final Trigger. But I didn't act. Not yet. I let my brother keep shining. Let him attend events. Let him sit down for interviews about family legacy and brotherly resilience. I watched him speak like he was the chosen one, like I was just the shadow left behind. He'd built something on my name, and I was going to tear it down with his own words. One cabin buyer forwarded me an email. "You're lucky I caught this," he said. At first I thought it was you. It wasn't. The email was signed with my name, but the voice was wrong. Too casual. Too arrogant. I knew instantly it was my brother, pretending to be me, sealing deals, claiming inheritance rights he didn't own. That email alone could sink him. I printed it, framed it. I hung it above my desk right next to the real will. This wasn't about confrontation anymore. It wasn't about yelling or proving myself. This was about patience. He was building a tower higher and higher. I just had to wait for the right moment to pull one piece from the bottom and watch the whole thing fall. He didn't just steal from me. He buried himself in evidence I never had to fake. The city council gala shimmered like a lie wrapped in gold. Chandeliers lit the room in soft amber tones, casting long shadows across marble floors polished to a mirror's edge. I walked in quietly, dressed in a simple black suit, my shoes silent against the floor. The cane I leaned on belonged to my father, his initials still carved at the base. The moment I crossed the threshold, I saw my brother already working the room, shaking hands, laughing politely, holding a glass of champagne like he belonged in a world built on clean money and earned respect. He didn't see me yet. He wore a custom gray suit, probably imported, with his hair slicked back and his smile rehearsed to perfection. A small circle of developers and councilmen surrounded him like moths to a flame. But it wasn't pride on his face. I could see it. I knew that look. It was performance. Every smile he gave them had a slight pause before it, like he was testing it out before putting it on. I stood near the back wall, beside the coat check, my hands folded quietly over the cane. I didn't need anyone to see me. I was only here for one moment. When they finally called his name, the crowd burst into applause. He walked toward the stage like he'd won something honest. A banner behind him read Community Leadership through Sustainable Development. I almost laughed. Almost. The applause faded as he took the mic, eyes gleaming under the stage lights. "I'm truly honored," he began, his voice deep and confident. "I stand here today not just as a builder of structures, but as a believer in legacy. My father taught me that true wealth is what you leave behind. And though he's gone, I know he's here with me tonight." He paused. His voice softened. And to my family, whose strength I carry with me always. I walked forward. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just enough for the right people to notice. The event coordinator, a slim man in a red blazer with a headset, turned toward me. I handed him a sealed manila envelope and said, "This belongs on record." He hesitated, but something in my voice made him nod. "I'll make sure it's delivered," he said softly. Inside that envelope were copies of the original power of attorney, the real will our father had signed, and the email my brother wrote pretending to be me. It was a clean lie packaged to look like truth. Until now, I didn't glance at the stage. I didn't need to, but the moment I turned back toward the exit, I felt his eyes lock onto me, like a cold breeze against the back of my neck. I stopped, slowly turned my head just enough to catch his stare. His mouth didn't move, but his face cracked. It was only a flicker, but I saw it. Panic, confusion, and something else, recognition. The way a man looks when he realizes the lie he built now has corners he didn't check. I nodded once, almost respectfully, and walked out. The next morning, I filed the civil suit, inheritance fraud, identity theft, document forgery. I didn't send him a message. I didn't give a warning. Let the knock on his door speak for me. By noon, the local press caught wind of it. Respected developer faces legal storm over alleged family betrayal. The article didn't include my name. I asked them not to. I wasn't chasing attention. I was chasing justice, quietly, methodically. I watched the news from my apartment, sipping tea, my lawyer beside me. He read through the updates like clockwork. "His accounts are frozen," he said, tapping a legal pad. "Investment firms will pull out within the week. You sure you don't want to go for criminal charges too?" "Not yet," I said. "Let him sweat first." A week later, 2 of his partners dropped out. One called me and asked, nervously, "Is this real? You have proof?" "I do," I said plainly, "but I'm not making a show of it." He sighed. "He said you were still recovering, that you signed everything willingly." "I did," I replied, "and now I'm signing it all back." That same day, I sent the full file to the state bar. My brother's friend, a lawyer who'd helped push the forged documents through probate, was disbarred within weeks. My brother didn't just lose a co-conspirator. He lost a shield. Still, I didn't speak to him. But I remembered something. A night from our childhood. We were barely 10. He kept stealing my chess pieces just to irritate me. I warned him. He kept going. When I finally shoved him hard and made him cry, our mother came in. She didn't yell. She asked me why I'd done it. I told her. Because he doesn't stop until someone makes him. She held me, whispered, "Then don't become him. Learn to hurt without hitting." I never forgot that. And now, years later, I was hurting him in a way he couldn't punch back. His development contracts stalled. Buyers backed out. The cabins he'd sold were now tied up in court. I had my lawyer send quiet notices of breach of agreement to every party involved. No press release. No threats. Just paperwork. My brother watched his empire untangle like thread pulled at the right seam. Our father's house, the one he tried to claim as his own, was transferred back into the family trust. He'd leveraged it to get a loan for another property. That loan was now being recalled. He tried to sell his own apartment to cover legal fees, but a lien froze that too. I made sure he had enough to survive. Just enough. The rest I reclaimed. Then came the email. "You always were the smarter one," it said. "No apology. No remorse." Just an old truth he finally had to accept. I didn't respond. Because when you know a man like that, really know him, you realize that talking only feeds him. But silence? Silence starves him. And while he was scrambling to hold the pieces together, I had already rebuilt my life in the quiet. I'd moved out of the city, started work with a foundation that honored our father's original wishes. A fund to help young men starting from nothing. The kind of legacy my father would have been proud of. The cameras eventually stopped flashing. The papers stopped printing his name. He was left with no spotlight. No applause. And I never had to shout. I didn't destroy him. I let the truth do it for me. The key turned with a groan. like the house itself was waking from a long sleep. I stood there for a moment, hands still on the knob, the smell of damp wood and old memories curling out through the cracked door. The porch boards creaked beneath me, familiar in that ghostly way that makes your chest tighten. The wind moved through the tall grass, brushing against my legs like it remembered me too. I stepped inside. Dust coated the floor like ash. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the low hum of insects outside and the occasional groan of the walls settling. My boots echoed as I walked through the hallway, the same path my father used to take every morning, coffee mug in hand. I found the kitchen untouched, aside from the paint job, stark white, sterile, like someone had tried to scrub out the past. I stood by the sink and looked out the window. The swing still hung from the tree, rusted chains swaying gently. That was where Mom used to sit in the evenings, humming hymns while we chased fireflies. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but there was only this strange calm, slow and heavy, like the house itself was breathing again, sinking with me. I spent that first night on the floor of my old bedroom. No bed, no sheets, just me, the hardwood, and the sound of the wind scratching at the windows. I lay on my back, eyes open to the ceiling, remembering how I used to count the knots in the wood when I couldn't sleep as a boy. Now I counted the victories, one by one. Took months to get the cabins back. The buyers had been sloppy, greedy. One tried to threaten me with lawyers. I sent over a single sheet of paper, a signature that didn't match mine, a notarization that never existed. He folded in 2 days. The second buyer tried to hold out, thought I was bluffing. He lasted 2 weeks before he offered the deed back in exchange for silence. I gave it to him. I didn't want headlines. I wanted truth. Each cabin I reclaimed, I rebuilt. Sanded the floors until they shone. Replaced broken windows. Cleared the brush. I moved slow, deliberate, just like Dad taught me.
No shortcuts.
Just work. One evening, I stood in the doorway of the last cabin, staring at the photo I just hung. Mom and Dad, arms wrapped around each other, smiling like they had all the time in the world. I pressed my hand against the wood beside it. Solid. Honest. The swing on the main house porch groaned under my weight as I sat, hands folded in my lap. The breeze carried the scent of pine and something older. Smoke from the hearths I'd relit, soil warmed by the returning sun. I closed my eyes. I could almost hear our laughter from long ago. 2 boys running barefoot through the yard. Him always ahead, always louder. Me always watching, always quieter. I didn't ask where he went. Someone mentioned he'd taken a job selling used cars 2 states over. Another said he was couch surfing, burnt bridges behind him. The foundation he tried to launch fizzled out in weeks. Investors pulled out. Social media turned cold. His old friends stopped returning calls. The noise he built around himself, the bragging, the bluster, was gone. And in its place, silence. I saw an article once, buried in the back of the local paper. It mentioned a man by his name who was caught using someone else's credentials to apply for a grant. No charges filed. Just shame. A quiet, embarrassing stain that clings like smoke. I clipped it and tucked it away. Not out of spite, just for the record. One morning, I found myself on the back steps, watching dew bead on the grass. I thought about the coma, the machines, the whispering nurses. I remembered how still everything was in that space between worlds, how my mind had wandered backward through time while my body lay frozen. He had no idea I was hearing it all. I remembered his voice, low and rehearsed, saying things like, "It's what he would have wanted." And he never was good with responsibility. Lies, wrapped in grief, spoken to strangers in suits. He thought I wouldn't come back, that even if I did, I wouldn't know what he took. But I remembered everything, every forged document, every whispered betrayal. And I didn't fight with fists. I used paper. I used law. I used patience. Now every inch of land that was stolen is mine again. Every nail driven back into place by my own hand. Every lie undone. Every truth restored. The county records list only one name across the deeds.
Mine.
Not because I demanded it, because it always should have been. I don't feel pride. Not really. Just peace. Like a room finally still after a storm. Like the weight of ghosts lifting off the floorboards. I sit here most evenings, right where Mom used to, on the porch swing, my legs creaking with the motion. Sometimes I hear the world moving on. Cars down distant roads. Birds calling. But in this space, in this land, in this house, there's only memory. Only what was earned, not taken. He thought I'd stay buried. But I rose, quiet and exact, and took back what was always mine.